lại đi nè chị băng thật luôn hả
cái này chẳng học
ăn cái ai này về em tán cho chị ăn vậy lên đi cái room coi cái đàn
biết thì cô cũng làm
sao nó coi chẳng vậy cái tao chốt tao tự sẵn
ăn tới trong cái học cái hôm nay có hai cô con trong
một số bữa tao ở apa ơi cái chưa cũng bằng cái tay tao sang đất chả tao sang này cái cừu bên lúc kia bánh hay ôn nào
trong bánh nữa
cho à thon lúc dân chỉ có một cái tờ lệ tam này cừu mà
cái nó là ta ơi
bo này khổ
cú số hai cái của bạn này cái tiền kia ở trong lẽ là cái lẽ chú rồi
hai
đó chọn hao thì chọn hao
chọn bên trên tờ lệ ấy
chọn số hai là số hai có thể là có
thôi tóc nó chia bông này
đúng không chụp được rồi
ăn đấy cho nó ngon mà ngày kia dùng trong
hay
ý còn mà phai phai anh lấy mấy phai mà anh này phai mà muối phai này đó
trong ban mà trong ăn sắm mưa tôi bên tao tao sáng thế
sao mà xài bay lên á lên ngày xài bay ấy là scale bên mà liệp ôn đặt poly ai nè
trong cái này hai vô smile đó
nên ngày
sải bay
bay đây
nó tức mình cả lớp
đây chụp ở em mà thay của mỗi cái vô đấy mình chỉ mình cái bài vì kêu nó tặng như là bạn chóng chờ nó không yêu cầu tình anh vậy lấy ơi yêu tình bạn này mà chứ nào ba trong cái là ngày biết
không phải được bạn
nên có nhung cái mà con muốn hỏi bạn đi có các bạn bày
có bóng trống nè
ôi là khổ ơi tôi chết anh nè ô mình không còn ở nhà con thôi thì không còn
thì tại là mình trước vậy như kháng thì một cái miếng một miếng
chốt tin ban là ai vui thế
ban vô thì ai không nơi coffee nó
tôi biết sao đó đang nghĩ tha ai còn sẽ chấp cái hồ cái bảy
và đây bảy
200 thao một chung đi phải chọn à lơ đi không
làm sao mấy ngày cho nó ăn kho rụng đấy
nhóm hai cái thao
rụng
luôn
cho là
xong rồi
human trafficking in Pacific
nhưng mà đấy là ban thọt hả
còn bên não xô mồ không biết được
đây là đúng thì ban thọt hả
bên bạn thọt đây
thọt bây dục đấy của ăn là sẽ đi đâu ra luôn
cái này bán tới đấy
đấy bây mau con lọ mau anh nhé em em mau bảy mau một cái tung thì
này bán cho hỏi phải xem khi em học
tệ nhỏ với người mà châu công ty vì mẹ nó con ta
còn nó online thì
nhưng bên em mà cái người nè sao mấy nhở
do your timekeepers today.
Oh, thank
So
you.
I'll give you a holler. I'll just do it like, yeah. I'm supposed to have like a cool page to hold up, but it's not here. Alright, you're good to start whenever, Steven.
I'm having problems. There it
Oh,
is.
do you need
Okay.
help?
Yeah, I worked
Can
it
you
out.
call Joe?
No, but.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, welcome. Just gonna just caffeinating just one last time, and then I'll get on with my presentation. I've just finished lecturing, so I'm kind of like between just lectured, 15-minute break, and now I'm presenting. So it's all good. Just need to caffeinate.
Same.
Okay, well, welcome to this breakout session. My name is Dr. Stephen Morse. I'm from Sydney, Australia, and I run a company along with my wife Sarah. It's called Unchained Solutions. So we're a little bit different to probably many of the organizations here, where when we're not a not-for-profit, we're actually a business, a company, and we are a social enterprise. And so the work that we do is mainly in the demand space rather than in the supply space, if you want to think in those categories. So we work with companies, large corporations, small organizations, to help them to identify risks, primarily in their supply chain operations. So the work that we do is not focused on, say, sex work. It's focused on issues of forced labor, child labor, and trafficking more broadly. It does touch on issues to do with, say, what was discussed earlier today around cybersecurity, but I won't talk about that today. But yeah, that's most of the work that we do. And today, what I want to do is really just talk about 3 organizations that we're in partnership with and the tools that they use to help organizations to address different issues relating to human rights and the environment, so the question of ESG. So we're going to be speaking a little bit more broadly than perhaps we have already been speaking today about how these tools are being used, not just to address the risk of human trafficking or modern slavery, and modern slavery is the term that I use, so if I slip into that language, please forgive me. I know it's not universally applied.
Could you speak slowly?
I can, yes, I can slow down. No problem. So we work with these tools are being used to help companies to look at different issues across a range of impact areas to do with not just human rights, but the environment as well, and questions around governance. So please ask me to slow down if I speed up on that as well. So just a little bit more of a background in terms of who we are. So as I mentioned, we are based in Sydney, Australia. We're a company. We were founded in 2018 by my wife and I So we're a female-owned business. We have B Corp certification, as well as we're a certified social trader, which is an Australian certification, which just really demonstrates that we are a business that is for purpose, a business that is doing good, and we have the right governance around us to do that, the right credentials. Our background to this, we were actually working the grassroots. So for a time, and this is now some time ago, back in the 20 teens, if you like, we were based in Spain. Sarah is a registered nurse and was working in a safe house for women coming off the streets, and I was doing my doctoral research into some of the male demand for sexual services which give rise to trafficking. So that's our background. We pivoted in 2018 to looking more at, I suppose in many ways, the bigger category of risk, which is around forced labour, what's going on inside of factories, on farms, in fisheries, in forestries and the like, and mines as well. Anyway, so that's most of our work is around compliance with the Modern Slavery Act, which is a piece of legislation in Australia, and it targets the private sector primarily to help them to identify risks and address those risks amongst their suppliers and their supply base and those who service their facilities, their operations. So that's the bulk of the work that we do. And our purpose really is to really not just help companies to comply with that legislation, but really to go beyond that, to sort of lead with courage, to actually make an impact more broadly. It's one thing to comply with the legislation. What we actually are looking for them to do is to go beyond that, and part of our commitment as a social enterprise is to partner with, we partner primarily with the Freedom Business Alliance, which we profit share with them to support other social enterprises that are working at the grassroots, such as you, many of you, to work with survivors or people who are at risk of being trafficked and different issues of slavery. Just a couple more things in terms of what we do. So we offer, most of our work is around strategic planning with organizations. We help them to create a roadmap for good practice for conducting due diligence. We do risk assessing, risk management. We help them to map their suppliers and identify where the risks are. We do a lot of stakeholder engagement with those suppliers, helping suppliers to then align their business practices with their corporate clients. So a lot of work around skills, capacity building, and we do work around impact measurement, helping companies to set up the right framework to measure the impact that they want to make as well. And we work with a range of clients as well. Some of our biggest clients are in the mining sector and the construction sector, but we've done work across many sectors, which has been really important for us to see the interconnectivity between different sectors and the similar issues. So we're an issues-based company, and that enables us to apply our services to a range of different companies as well, and that just really adds to the breadth of the work that we're doing and the experience that we have with companies. And just as a little promo, I'm just about to publish a book, so just to let you know, which may be applicable to you. So I've co-written a book with another consultant called Bronwyn Reed. It's called Small Business Big Impact, and it's a book about how small companies can engage with the issues around the environment, human rights and governance, and how they can think through what does it mean to align their business practices with a corporate client or a government department who are continually asking with increased intensity, what are they doing around some of these impact areas. So that's why we wrote the book, to equip small businesses or small organizations to identify and address those issues. So that's coming out on August 22, which is not far away. All right, so what I want to start with, just as an entry into what we're thinking of here, is to consider, just to give an overview of ESG governance. I want to start with a story of a shipping company. This story dates back to 2022, May 2022, and this ship, AG Neptune, which is a fuel tanker, was arrested off the port of Newcastle in the state of New South Wales in Australia. It was arrested after it was discovered there were two issues. One, that the fuel on the ship had been contaminated by water, and the fuel was worth around $75 million US dollars. And after that discovery, upon further investigation, there were 21 seafarers on board who were suffering a range of human rights violations, including inadequate food, water, medical supplies, and they were underpaid. There was underpayments of around 120,000 US dollars. So as a result, this ship was then banned from Australian waters for up to 6 months, and then the story disappeared from the media. So it's hard to know what's happened after that. But really, our connection to this story is that one of our clients, a mining company who uses whose energy provider had their fuel on that ship, wanted us to do a little investigation into what was actually in place, what were the kind of controls, what kind of governance and risk management was in place. And that was not an easy process to undertake. There are many stakeholders involved in shipping. There's the ship itself, which was owned by Liberia. The ship was refueled in Taiwan. The ship was chartered by a charter company from the UK. The energy company which had their fuel in the ship was Australian. And then we had our client who uses this energy company as one of their main suppliers. And you can see then, and I haven't even mentioned, for example, the ports and then the actual seafarers on board. There are many actors and stakeholders in place, and the shipping industry at large is largely unaccounted for when it comes to due diligence. So you could do a survey of any shipping company, you would be struggling to find one. In fact, there are only probably 2 that are reporting under any national legislation, that being the UK Modern Slavery Act, and another having some form of policies. But most shipping companies seem to ride above national regulations, and that's how the industry works. So there's lots of risks, therefore, involved in shipping, in logistics and transportation as a whole. And I really wanted to mention this story as an introduction because it just highlights some of the complexities around reporting, ESG reporting, the connection between human rights and environment, and some of the challenges that are there when it comes to reporting. So in today's business landscape, environmental, social and governance, that's ESG considerations, have evolved from merely being peripheral concerns to becoming integral components of large organisations overall and for their overall strategy. And this applies not just to large businesses but also to small. So the reporting entities are those that are the large ones, but there's downward pressure on suppliers, and so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And that's not a bad thing, because it means that as we work through supply chains and we start crossing borders with those kind of activities, then we're getting closer to the source of where goods and services are being made, and we can actually affect change. For those who are unfamiliar with the ESG landscape, it's quite diverse, quite complex. There are a range of issues, and each of them we could write a whole year's worth of material just exploring those. So I won't go into any detail, but really just to point out the complexity of the issues. There is a bit of a pushback against ESG because of this complexity. It's a bit of a buzzword, and AI is also a bit of a buzzword. But really just to point out that whilst there are 3 main silos, there is an interconnection between the 2. And if you were at the session earlier today, you would see that, for example, questions around anti-money laundering and cybersecurity are very much connected to human rights because of the way that people are now being exploited in scamming compounds. This issue of cybersecurity alone, which is very topical today, has implications also for the environment, because if cyber can be used as a weapon of war, then we can actually affect critical infrastructure, which might have major environmental impacts. So we can't, whilst we can try and silo things, we need to see them connected together. And so many companies today are reporting in at different levels, and there's no universal framework for doing so. There are many international directives, but there's a lot of national regulations. The country I come from is heavily regulated, and we love regulation in Australia. So we're increasing our regulation, and we've recently put in new regulation around climate-related financial disclosures. So companies need to report on the risks, environmental risks, particularly around emissions, to their business. So there's lots of issues around risk management, but also there's a really big push and many levers encouraging people to demonstrate good practice across the ESG landscape. And even just internationally, and I won't go into these in any great detail, but there's an increasing amount of global international regulation, some of the latest being the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directives, and even just on the human rights front, we can see that since 2010, with the introduction of the Transparency in Supply Chain Act in the state of California, there's just been this rise in legislation globally, mainly concentrated in Europe, but also we're seeing now legislation in places like Japan, Korea, and Australia, New Zealand's still thinking about it, but Canada as well. So there's increasing amounts of legislation and an increasing priority on this term called due diligence. So it's not just about reporting on what frameworks you have, you also need to actually demonstrate what activities you're taking to really drill down into your supply chains and understand what the risks are and how you can actually address those risks as well. Now I took a poll. I took a poll for this conference, which I do every year. I like putting up polls, and it's no surprise that when I asked you which area of ESG that you major in the most, that most of you put social, which is the same as last year. Although there was a little bit more effort being put into the environment when I did the poll last year. But just to kind of give you an indication that, and one of the challenges I think for all organisations is not just to, in a sense, focus on the social dimension that we're working on, but maybe how can we, the challenge is really considering what are we wrapping the work around that, what kind of governance structures do we have in place to demonstrate that we, in terms of how we're running our organisations, but also what kind of ways can we also be making an impact on the environment through the work that we're doing as well. So just to encourage you on that. The other poll that I put out was also around to what extent you think AI technology will be effective in combating human trafficking, and we had an average of 3.9, which I thought was quite positive. I thought people were being quite positive around that and the potentiality of AI, which we'll delve in today. So how do we understand AI and its role in ESG reporting? Well, there are three, just some highlight points, and I'm not sure to what extent you're familiar with AI and what does it mean and the types of different models and processes. So here are some points that I just wanted to make around different models. So we've got machine learning, we've got natural language processing, and then there's generative AI concepts. I'm just going to read off the screen because my screen's too small. So machine learning algorithms can analyze vast amounts of ESG data to identify patterns, trends, and anomalies, and it offers predictive analytics for future ESG risks. Automated data validation and anomaly detection. So that's how machine learning AI models can be used in terms of identifying risks. In terms of natural language processing, NLP enables AI to understand and process human language, making it possible to analyze unstructured data from reports, news articles, and social media, and therefore to integrate that information and make it communicable. And so it can, in terms of ESG, it can extract information from textual data, sentiment analysis, and automated report generation. And then there's generative AI models such as ChatGPT, and these can create human-like text, make it easier to generate comprehensive ESG reports and narratives. So AI can then be used, the different models that are out there and that are evolving are being used and integrated, and we'll see how that is being played out in the different models that I'm going to present today, how this technology is being used to address the risks and the complexities of ESG reporting. And there are many benefits to the use of AI. It's an emerging space, as you know, and as you've probably experienced, and I'm not quite sure to what extent you're integrating AI into your own practices at the moment, but AI is enabling companies to increase and enhance their accuracy and the consistency. So it can, in terms of the data and data validation, there's increased efficiencies and cost savings to do with AI, particularly in terms of time, although one of the challenges of AI technology is the use of energy, so that's something that needs to be, is being looked at and addressed. AI can then provide actionable insights almost instantly, helping companies to process information much more quickly and move through the data much more quickly. And then it can also provide real-time monitoring so that people can actually, rather than crunching through layers of data, they can actually see in real time what's happening, and they can take action. So those kind of the efficiency and the accuracy is enabling companies to really look at the data, look at the information that they have. Obviously that data needs to be correct information. That's one of the challenges, but it's enabling companies to actually move quickly, and we're going to see what that looks like in a moment. I mentioned earlier some of the challenges. So data quality and bias can affect the actual information. Energy consumption, which is a huge concern, and also considering the growth and the use of AI. And then the other complication then has to do with the evolving regulatory requirements. So as those regulations increase, and we are seeing increased regulation globally, then how do we actually sort of monitor those and the impact that's going to have in terms of the data that we're actually going to be processing. So in terms of the work we do, we're currently working with 3 companies, and they're all from different locations. We're working with a company called Trace Supply Chain Intelligence. They're based in Australia. And through them, we have an automated ESG reporting platform. And this platform is being used to integrate AI and environmental screening. So it's a tool to actually, before you reach out to a supplier and ask them to validate perhaps what the kind of credentials they have, AI is being used to screen those suppliers in the first place, and then target in order to make the engagement with those suppliers much more targeted. The second company is Blockticity. They're based in the US, in Miami, and we're actually currently in discussions with them to integrate what they're doing into the Australian context. And so their focus is around protecting certificates, certifications, for example. And so it's sort of anti-counterfeiting blockchain technology. So using blockchain technology, integrating AI tools as well to protect certifications around products. So when products are then moving from port to port, then the certification around that pallet, for example, is protected because counterfeiting is a real issue and costing trillions. The other company we're working with is based in the United Kingdom. It's called 58, and they have an app called Just Good Work. And this is a worker voice application which is using AI. So in the time that we have, which I know is not much, I'm just going to touch on what these tools are doing and how they can be of use. They may not necessarily be relevant to you. Probably the one that may be the most relevant to you would probably be the Worker Voice app, because I know that 58 are very keen to work with not-for-profits to integrate their application and to apply that to help survivors with that application. All right, so let's dive in. So Trace SCI, a real-time ESG intelligence. So just a little bit about Trace. So this company is, in terms of their platform, so they've developed a platform, and the platform is really transforming the way that data is collected. So one of the challenges of data collection in traditional models, which are still in place, is that companies will conduct a risk assessment of a supplier or a pool of suppliers, and you might have, depending on your company, you might have 50, 100, you might have 1,000, you might have 3,000 suppliers. And what you're wanting to do is really to validate the kind of credentials that they have. So part of that is to then conduct various risk assessments. Those risks might relate to, say, modern slavery, human trafficking risks. They could be risks relating to data and privacy. There could be risks relating to emissions and resource management. And collecting that data can be very time consuming and long. And so inherent risk assessments will draw upon data sets and authorities such as the International Labour Organization, the Global Slavery Index, for example, and actually then create a risk profile for each of those suppliers, through which then we can determine which suppliers we then need to reach out to verify. And it's in that verification piece then, as many companies receive an email, they might receive a form, a self-assessment questionnaire, and they might need to answer perhaps up to 30 questions. Questions which are around, for example, what kind of policies you have in place, what kind of certifications, what kind of auditing has been conducted on your factory, on your company, what kind of training has been provided to your internal stakeholders, to your team, what steps have you taken to assess risks from your suppliers? Because if you're a company, you're in a supply chain, well, you're supplying to this company, but you've also got companies supplying to you, so what work have you done? So as you can imagine, just from that, just painting that scenario, then that can be a very time-consuming exercise, and it is a time-consuming exercise because we do that, we work with our clients as they do that process. What Trace has done is really used a number of data sets and integrate sort of through a AI process and algorithm to kind of integrate all that information and pull all that data into a platform so they can actually assess, even before they reach out to a supplier, what those suppliers will actually have in place, and then create a risk score for them. So let me just bring that up for you, what that might look like. So here we have, this is an example of their dashboard, and they'll have an overall ESG rating out of 1,000, which is not the average of those three, just to point that out. And then under the three categories, you'll have environmental, social, and governance, and within each of those categories, it'll granulate. And so what they can do then is they can identify through the data, through international trade data, banking data, AI processing, what kind of credentials companies have in place, what kind of ESG themes a company is focused on, what kind of different ISOs, for example, auditing frameworks they have, in ways they're aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals, what kind of targets have they set, what kind of attributes and credentials. And the whole point of that then, in terms of generating that kind of report, is that companies then, rather than asking suppliers to answer questions that they may not necessarily want to answer, and just having conversations just yesterday around some of the tensions that are out there and exist around suppliers self-reporting.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Could you repeat that?
Okay, I will. Sorry, that was a bit weird. AI, thank you. Thanks, Siri.
That's ironic.
It was quite ironic, wasn't it? This is to break the tension. So what they can do is, rather than reaching out to suppliers who may not necessarily know how to answer some of those questions, and I think that's one of the challenges, or there may be a challenge of actually not just understanding the question, but also they may not, in order to save face, just to sort of placate their client who they're wanting to do business with, to just tick the box and just say, yes, we have that credential. This tool using AI then enables, before we reach out to a supplier, to actually we know what the supplier has even before we reach out to them. And if you've got several thousand suppliers, that could be hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of outreach and trying to drill down the supply chain and often in different languages, for example, to actually try and get that information. So the AI technology integrating other data sets is then able to pull that information into a dashboard and generate a report, which will then enable a company to then be much more targeted. So there could be questions that through this analysis, then if they're not rating well, and you can see that it's 282 on the social, we can then actually, okay, well there's key questions there that we need to ask. So we can target our questions much rather than just put out a blanket SAQ. And I'm not sure if any of you have had that kind of experience as a supplier, but that can be quite onerous. I know suppliers who every single week receive a form from some company that they're doing business with to answer questions. But if you actually have something which is more integrated and you have a report, you can say, well, this is actually our report. So it can work both ways. And that's part of the benefit of this tool, despite all the slides that I have. And that's all right. No, I can't even know. Oh, man, what have you done, Siri? Cool. All right, so just some of the examples. Buildcorp is a construction company in Australia that we do business with, one of our clients, and we used this platform. We were able to assess 254 suppliers across all tiers, and then screen all that information very, very quickly using the tool rather than having to do all that manually as well. And another example, this is not our client, this is through Trace. They've done some work with Emirates, so one of the third largest airline, and again, through their assessment, then we're able to identify through the thousands of suppliers that they have. Every supplier will then get a risk profile, and then they can actually process that information. And that really just speeds up the due diligence process. All right, I'm going to move on because I know that time is of the essence. All right, the next tool, and happy to take questions at the end if you want to put your questions. I have no idea what questions are coming up, but anyway. So the next tool has to do with the technology of blockchain, use of blockchain. And the company is Blockticity. They're based in the US. And they claim that counterfeit supply chain documents cost the global economy $4.7 trillion in loss in goods every year. So because of and this is probably an unknown issue for most of us. It certainly was before I started actually partnering with Blockticity. But the relevancy of this is that if certifications on different products and product SKUs can be counterfeited, what it means is if a company's in terms of their products is actually conducting good business practices and they're adhering, for example, to questions around deforestation, they've got a really good track record on deforestation. And they might have also a really good track record on human rights. So they've got factories that are certified, so SA 8000 certification. If that's all then part of the certification that's attributed to that product, if that can be counterfeited, that means that then someone else could actually use that certification for their pallet of goods and then pretend that actually that they have those attributes as well. So that's in terms of the relevancy to what's in the in terms of who is in the room today and what we're talking about is that this anti-counterfeiting technology applies across a range of different metrics for a product, but it actually has implications for ESG and in particular questions around human rights as well. So that's the relevancy of the technology. And so just some examples of that. So tracking diamonds, ethical sourcing imperative. Ethical diamond sourcing is vital due to its links to environmental harm, human rights abuses, and child labour, amid growing demand for ethical supply chains. So the rise of ethical supply chains, and this, if you like, is kind of at the end point, making sure that what is being done ethically and sustainably, when it gets to port and gets through customs, then the use of blockchain technology then protects that information so it can be validated at the point of entry into a port and through customs. Transparency challenge: ensuring supply chain transparency is vital as firms and consumers seek ethically sourced cobalt, requiring intricate tracking from mining to end products. So that's one of the challenges and the promises of technologies, that we can actually start. Technology can then be used to make sure that that right throughout the supply chain, and some of these products have extensive supply chains, that those risks are being monitored and addressed throughout. There are security risks. Supply chain susceptibility to disruptions driven by factors such as political instability and labour disputes pose a significant challenge, especially with the rising EV and renewable energy demand. And one of the challenges of electric vehicles, for example, is that whilst on the one hand we need to develop batteries to develop cars that are less reliant on fossil fuels, for example, at the same time that the demand for that is not necessarily decreasing our reliance on complex minerals and the risks involved in the extraction of those minerals in places particularly like Democratic Republic of Congo, where there are lots of allegations and cases of child labour abuses. So our drive for the environmental solutions, in our drive for environmental solutions, we also need to consider the cost around human rights as well. Coming back to the initial question. Environmental concerns, mining ecological impacts including deforestation and pollution necessitate strict adherence to environmental rules, centralising environmental management in the supply chain. And then price volatility impacts. Historical emerald price instability influenced by supply hiccups and demand shifts profoundly affects industries like automotive and electronics, presenting profitability and stability hurdles as well. So that's all very much part of the contemporary landscape around tracking. So Blockticity is a blockchain-driven authenticity verification platform. So that's what they do. And it's operating and has been successfully verified $275 million in real world, so it's US dollars, in real world assets in the past year. So it's a I suppose if you like, it's a startup business, although it's quite a successful startup and doing well. Started in the United States, and they're doing a lot of work now in the Philippines. That's one of their main areas. So what they're trying to do is not just work with companies to ensure that certifications aren't, there's no fraud involved in certifications for products made within the United States. They're now also working in the Philippines, and then through us, we're working with them to integrate into the Australian context as well, particularly in the area of agriculture, which is a key industry we think that they should focus on at this present time. So Blockticity protects against counterfeit documents and fraud in the global marketplace, and whilst that has implications around quality and the protection of products, it also has implications around the environment and human rights as well. And so part of that process, there's steps in terms of in terms of the validation. So documents are submitted, and Avalanche is the technology that they're using to bring all that data into and integrate that into the blockchain sphere, if you like. The NFT then is the specific kind of code that then protects that data, and then there's the final scan in order to access that information with the relevant authorities who can then verify that information. So that's the basic kind of steps that the technology uses. And part of the work that Blockticity does, and this is where it definitely will integrate AIs that can help companies to generate those certifications. So the use of AI with the blockchain technology is to help companies to actually prepare their documents to make sure that they're in alignment with different international regulations and certifications, for example, and that that alignment then is then recognised and kept secure through blockchain technology. And so I won't go into great detail just in terms of the use of time because I want to get onto Just Good Work, but there's different sectors that they're now working in. So one has to do with solar panels. And so here, if you're mindful of two really the dynamics to do with solar panels, one has to do with the extraction of raw materials, which I mentioned earlier, which has its own risk. So there's severe risks in terms of those critical conflict minerals that go into solar technology. And then there are also risks in terms of the manufacturing in places in West China, in Xinjiang province, where there is the allegation of forced labor among Uyghur peoples. So there's two issues in terms of labor risk, both at sourcing and material refining and manufacturing, and then the price, and then in addition to that, then you have the shipping and the logistics. So you can see there's lots of touch points, and the whole point of the technology then is to actually help track the movement of those products to actually and protect those products as they work through the supply chain at the different touch points, all the way through to installation and deployment. So that's the promise and the work that they're offering. So they've done work there. They're also doing work around coffee, the coffee supply chain, particularly in Brazil, so in South America, and then doing work around the extraction of critical minerals itself. That will then go into different types of products as well. So that's Blockticity in a nutshell, using blockchain technology and AI to protect certifications on different products, which have impacts for human rights and environmental due diligence as well. All right, how are we going? Good, all right. All right, so the final piece of technology I want to raise today relates to enabling workers to have agency, really, and to protect their rights, so they can actually take steps themselves before they enter into a situation of exploitation, potential exploitation, to actually understand what they're walking into. And that's really the whole kind of thesis around Just Good Work. So it's been developed by a company, 58 in the United Kingdom, and I suppose it all started really with someone that, a man that they were working with. He was a Kenyan, and he was looking into working in the Middle East and really looking to see if I go and do work in the Middle East in places like Qatar or Bahrain, what do I know what I'm walking into? And so really the whole premise of the tool is really a preventative tool, and sort of like a tourist guide, really, but more in terms of a work context. So the application is available and available for free for migrant workers, and to use both pre and during their experience of work. And so let me run through some of as you can see, there's an example, a mock example of a phone. So it's a simple, concise, and up-to-date information for all job seekers and workers in a language they can understand. So part of what they've done, using the tool, and this is where technology and AI technology is being used through the application, is to provide up-to-date information on different work contexts in different countries, so that people, and in different languages, for example, so that the information is simple and is accessible in different languages. And really to provide education on rights and responsibilities during recruitment and employment, and where to access help at every stage. So before someone takes the opportunity, I'm going to travel to X country, helps them to really understand what are the labor laws in that country. What should I expect from my prospective employer. What's the pay? What are the working conditions? What kind of contract will I receive? What will it be like? How would I find accommodation? Is there a community there that I can actually connect with? How can I actually get help? What kind of support can I receive if something doesn't actually work out? And then the technology then provides signposts to further help advise how to access remedy as well. So the application then can be used both by, say, a worker, and in terms of their own journey and sense of agency to actually, as a preventative tool, and also as a tool that they can use in the experience of work, but also can be used by companies, and the companies are the ones that pay for the tool. So the workers get the tool for free, the companies pay. So a company, for example, can actually make the tool available to, for example, all the employees at different levels of the supply chain, or for people who are actually going to be applying to work within their company. If they, for example, if they have operations in Asia, for example, then they can actually make the tool available so that people actually are empowered and have a much more better experience of work. So from a company perspective, it's really a proactive approach to recruitment. It can reduce onboarding time and costs. It can mitigate risks and really improve worker connection with those workers. So it really bridges the gap between producer, consumer, employer, and employee at a global scale. For the worker, then it's a simple, concise, and accurate information in their own language and accessible in audio, providing up-to-date information, where to get help, etc., and really how to kind of make sure that they're entering into safe and profitable work. So that's part of the promise of Just Good Work. Let me just go over to, that's the regulations. So at present, there's about 95 businesses that are using Just Good Work. There are 120,000 plus workers, and they're operating in 43 countries. So in the last 5 years, their growth it's been phenomenal, and in terms of and really what they're doing is kind of there's a research phase in what they do. So as they're looking at different migration paths of where people are actually choosing to work from. So if you might have people in Malaysia, for example, who are looking at a group, or then there's this sort of trend of people wanting to enter and work in the UK, or people from Poland into the UK, or you might have people from other parts of Southeast Asia wanting to then move into Asia or Thailand. So they're working out different migration paths and trends and how people are, where the opportunities come, and then they're doing research to then to upgrade the tool continually to provide information for those kinds of workers. So they're launching in different countries all the time. Let me, in terms of, I'll come back to that slide. So this map really just shows kind of the extent to which they're now working. So they're looking at the different paths. So it could be that people from Nepal, Bangladesh and Myanmar are wanting to work in Malaysia, or from Vietnam or Indonesia, so that's a big focus. So Malaysia, they have someone positioned in Malaysia, and so the focus of the tool is to help people from different countries, as if they're looking to work in Malaysia, then the tool is being applied in that way, and the tool is then being the tool is then put in the languages of those source countries, if you like. You can see then another focus, and a big focus is then entry into the UK, because that's where Just Good Work is based. And so they're both here. We can see people moving from Southeast Asia and also Eastern Europe to actually work in the United Kingdom. So providing up-to-date information of what does it mean to work in the United Kingdom, what they can expect. And then the other piece has to do with West Asia. So Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, the UAE, and then supporting workers, particularly from South Asia and East Africa, and working in there. So at the moment, we're in discussions with them to work out how we can bring Just Good Work into Australia, and particularly as has been mentioned so far in this conference, how can we actually support migrant workers, temporary workers, through the PALM scheme, which is a government scheme in Australia to supposedly protect workers, but lots of issues. As people come from the Pacific Islands, as people come from Southeast Asia into Australia, how can we actually give them, empower them? So this is the work of Just Good Work. All right. Cool, we're doing well actually. I think we're doing well. So yeah, so the list of routes is growing, and you can see there's different countries that they're working on. So they're constantly expanding the network. The UK being a big destination, and Malaysia also being quite and West Asia being quite a big destination as well. But setting up the tool to be used for people who are going to Poland, Romania, Spain, Mexico, Mauritius, Australia, India, Singapore. So there's continually looking at different regions and setting up the tool to be applied and used for different migration flows as people seek employment in different parts of the world. And then in terms of how this is then measured, how is all this information measured and used in terms of the effectiveness? This is probably more applicable for those companies that are implementing the tool in terms of their own operations in the supply chain. The business, I suppose the reporting entity, those who need to report under the different regulatory frameworks, then can have a customized dashboard, develop them so they can actually track the kind of data. The data will be anonymized, but they'll be able to see the kind of trends, the kind of issues that are arising through the experience of people working for them, and they'll be able to then, using that kind of technology, that kind of analytics, then they can actually take steps to improve and address certain issues. So that's part of the how they can then measure the risks, and that data is then presented to them, and they can use that for their own reporting as well as their own engagement with key stakeholders. All right, so I'm going to kind of pause there and have a drink. And are there any questions? Are there any questions, or should I be looking at this?
I'll get started.
There's some questions here.
Okay, great, thank you.
Alright. Oh, I'm on the wrong day. I'm sorry.
You're on the wrong day.
Alright.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much. This is very enlightening, especially on the just good work.
Yeah.
It's very amazing. I just actually have a question. So these are mostly a formal sector, yeah, related to say factories, maybe agricultural, and so on. And there are no touching upon say informal sector like domestic work, right? Are you familiar? Is there any similar kind of apps or similar kind of work that is done for specifically migrant domestic workers? Because when you see when you saw say Malaysia or Singapore, I didn't see any Indonesian and kind of that. So I assume that these data are mostly related to formal kind of job category like factories and so on. So that's one thing. And I agree with you that with current situation where Australia is opening work holiday visa, there are so many Indonesians, so many Thais, so many different nationalities actually going there with that visa. And would be good if these apps could be expanded, also covering that country or even Canada, because there are also some kind of employment patterns where many different nationalities looking opportunity for that demand in Canada, Australia, and regional living. It's not quite UK
Yeah.
based.
Yeah.
That one.
In relation to the first question, it doesn't have to be applied to a formal work setting such as a factory. So 58 are very keen to also speak to NGOs to work out solutions for more informal workers, because the promise of the Act is really, it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a particular work situation. It could just be that, you know, people are they may have already been exploited in the process, they may have already been trafficked from one jurisdiction to another. So it's about how can we equip them much more fully in understanding what they're stepping into. I mean, I suppose the app started really with understanding the aspirations of say a worker, and it was a Kenyan, a man from Kenya, who there was an opportunity in West Asia, in I think Qatar or Bahrain. So how can we better inform people about what they're stepping into? And that's probably more from an opportunistic kind of perspective. So someone who, I need to leave my home country because of lack of work, and there's an opportunity to work elsewhere. What am I stepping into? If you've already been exploited, the tool can still be used, because it's not just about recruitment. It's also about experience. So the tool can then be used to help for people to get probably a better sense of where their current experience of work and where they can get help as well. So, but I think it's worth then speaking to 58 because they are interested in talking to NGOs, not just the formal work. In relation to, I'm not sure if the other point was a question or not. There was a question around that, or just more of a comment. More of a comment. Okay, thank you.
All right, we got some questions on the app. The first one is, given that the effectiveness of AI in ESG governance depends heavily on the availability and quality of data, how can we ensure that this mechanism does not widen data gaps between the Global South and Global North, or reinforce structural disparities in data governance that favor those companies with more advanced data management systems and global ESG reporting, and hence more recognition globally?
Whew. That's a big question. I think I think that's recognised as certainly an issue that a lot of this rides on the quality of the data and the technology that you have available to use these tools. So I think what was the question? It was a big question. What was it? How do we close the gap, or?
It's a long one. You want me to repeat it?
I'll bring it up.
Okay. It's the second one from the top. The first one's already answered. Actually, it's on the top now.
It's on the top. Where am I? I mean, I think how do we make sure that we don't widen the gap? I think I think that question is really beyond, I suppose, the question of. I suppose it's a broader question around technology and access. Like who has access to power grids, and therefore access to those use of technology. So I think it's a bigger question around I suppose the challenge is then those who actually then have the power to screen suppliers, then I suppose they increase that power. But like all these things in terms of the use of technology, it's not the increased efficiency in using AI technology to screen suppliers should not necessarily be used as a mechanism then to boycott suppliers in the first instance. That's certainly not the spirit or the tenet of the regulation, certainly not in Australia anyway with the Modern Slavery Act. So the idea in the direction of due diligence is to not punish suppliers, but actually improve supply chains and build resilience and build capacity. So that's the I suppose the technology in all ways can be used for good or bad, and we've seen that with social media, right? So we're going to see that with AI technology. The technology is the promise of technology, and the hope of the technology is that the increased transparency then actually, and the speed at which that can be done, we can actually then get on to actually improving systems and structures and processes. But the risk is that it'll actually people can then, it can obviously do the reverse and create a widening the gap. So I don't really have an answer to that question, how we can do that, except to say that, this really all comes down to international development and investment really in structures, particularly energy grids and access to technology so that people can actually access those technologies.
All right, next up. Is it only up to companies to initiate further investigation into their supply chains, or are there governmental requirements for them to do so if they suspect criminal activity?
That comes down to what regulatory framework you're operating under. So the expectation, depending on the legislation, and just coming back to that timeline that I gave, some of the earlier legislation that we saw, particularly the Californian Supply Chain Transparency Act, even just the Modern Slavery Act in Australia, really the reporting, the legislation is weak in the sense that there's no fine for non-compliance, there's no fine for misleading information. And the risk is that many companies, and they do, and you can see that in their reporting, are just rehashing what they did the last year and putting a new date on it. So there's not much has actually happened. So unless the legislation has teeth, and we can see that in the latter legislation, particularly the EU's corporate sustainability reporting directives and other legislation, Germany and France, where there is actually a greater emphasis on companies not just setting up structures, but actually reporting on actually activities and being accountable for the due diligence. That's where we're going to see real change come about.
All right, the next one is about blocktivity. How does the blockchain record link to actual physical goods and services? Suppose a document is verified to say that some diamonds through a particular supply chain. How do we know it relates to these particular diamonds?
Okay, well that's that comes down to I suppose the decisions that have been made at that point to verify that information. So part of that, the blockchain technology is really premised on individual companies who are harvesting, extracting diamonds, for example, to actually apply a certification to those, and then using blockchain technology to carry that certification forward. So, I mean, the technology is there to be used in order to protect the data against fraud, but if it's not applied, then it's not going to be effective.
All right, next is, where would you advise NGOs or organizations to start when looking to address internal sustainable practices to make the biggest impact, and to encourage senior leaders to prioritize this work that may encourage greater engagement?
By sustainable, do we mean environmental, or is that kind of not specified? I'll take that as the sustainable meaning environmental. So I think, and this sort of relates to the work that we do with small businesses, because I think it's applicable as well. So it's really about working out a couple of things. One is if you're dependent, for example, on donors, funders, grants, and they're increasing their care, if you like, for good governance and risk management, then it's really a question. I think your starting point is working out what is it going to mean to align with those standards. So if they've set standards, if they're expecting, if they want to invest in you or grant you a non-refundable amount of money, for example, what kind of questions are they expecting of you? And those questions may be minimal at this point when it comes to environmental and human rights due diligence. They might just relate to more fiscal managers, questions around the use of money and the controls that are put in place to make sure, and to also make sure that the money is being used and applied. And there's an impact measurement piece around that, so you can demonstrate that how that money is being used. So that's more broadly governance. If they've got questions around environmental, I think a good place to start is really around probably your resource management. So I often encourage people to think through how do you, what are your strategies around single-use plastics, for example? So think through questions around packaging. Think through where do you supply your goods and services? Where are they coming from? What do you know about those suppliers? And they may be just local suppliers, they may be micro businesses, right? But just to be aware and know where those products are coming from. What can you do in terms of more of the tangible things around goods to actually source ethically and sustainably? Questions around, say, emissions, for example. You're probably going to be a smaller emitter, but your emissions are probably going to be more related to your energy provider. So it's a question of then plugging in and preferencing an energy provider that's offering renewable energy solutions for that you buy your energy from. So I think when it comes, if it's a question around sustainability, I think it's a question of then energy, of resources, questions around packaging, single use. It's a question around recycling and waste management as well. So how are you managing the resources that come in and out of your organisation? I think that's a really good place to start. And some really good examples of companies just starting there, really just starting with ruling out the use of certain products, particularly in the area of packaging, which is where a lot of waste is. How can we improve our packaging of the resources that we have? All right. Okay, well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure presenting. Thank you so much for listening and for attending. I really appreciate those questions. So happy to continue the conversation. I have set up a lunch if people want to talk further about the business sphere, if you like. So come and grab me and we can have lunch together and continue the conversation. Great, thank you.
There isn't a feature where the user can report violation transaction. Is that deliberate or? I mean, if I'm the user and I'm looking at these are the roles, this is what we expect, etc. And then somewhere during my journey, if something happens, where do I go?
Well, it's more help. It's the question is raised more recommended.
Right. Okay. So information is there in terms of
Because they may not necessarily be. They may not necessarily be in a position where knowledge like that. Because it could be dangerous to their interest. Because of the power balance, right? So it's more about agencies, more about support, and perhaps just about this work rather than confront my employer because of that, which they may not have any power to do, and they may not have recourse to affect change in relation to that. Because they're migrants, right? I suppose we're this agency.
What is it?
Catch you later.
A phone? Okay, I'll grab it. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Very comprehensive. Okay.
Glad to hear about.
That's right. Yeah, I know it's very bright.
So,
We can turn
some of
that
those tools.
I don't know if anyone took a photo with me, but I might get someone.
Yeah, Joe has taken a video, and who's the guy who takes the photos?
Tom.
Tom
He's
came in
flopped around.
and took a couple of photos.